Welcome. This is the Health and Wellness Coach Journal podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jessica Singh, the founder and CEO of the Center for Health and Wellness Coaches. This is a podcast for coaches to explore topics related to health, wellness, and coaching, sharing knowledge and sharing light. Dr. Jana, aka Doc, pronouns they, them, offers professionally facilitated mindfulness and wellness support as a certified sound healing practitioner, yoga, reiki, and meditation teacher, international coaching community, certified professional coach, and death doula. Doc is an artist and energy worker. They are a best-selling social justice author, painter, and mystic. Doc enjoys exploring the deeper dimensions of existence, seeking to awaken the power within each individual. Popular offerings include manifestation coaching, tarot, and Manifest Equity, a group-facilitated time travel experience. Dr. Jana has been featured in numerous publications and media, including Fast Company, New York Times, and Forbes, for their work on diversity, equity, empowerment, and inclusion. They've done a TEDx on privilege and were named one of the top 100 leadership speakers by Inc.com. Doc Jana was the founder of the world's first diversity-focused certified benefit corporation. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It is such a privilege and honor to have you here, and to be honest, very humbling.
Oh my goodness, the feeling is very mutual. I'm so glad that we were able to bring this together for your audience.
Yeah, I feel like a kid who gets to meet like a celebrity author or something because just to be very honest, when I read your book, so much clicked after going through all this medical education and training and experiencing that culture and not being taught about it before it happened, wondering if what you're happening is real and not realizing. I don't think I heard the term microaggressions until after I graduated residency. And so,
Wow.
yeah, when I read your book, I was like, oh my goodness, this was not in my head all this time. And so I am so excited to meet with you, to get to know you, and to share as much as I can your work.
It is a privilege. And coming from a medical family, that's really intriguing to hear that because diversity, equity, and inclusion values are so critical within, honestly, all spaces, but the medical space to have these kinds of concepts overlooked is a little bit negligent and a little dangerous because we really need the kind of psychological safety and care in the context of the medical establishment. We need that even more than in normal contexts because people are so vulnerable.
Patients and providers.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to just get to know, obviously, what got you started into doing DEI work?
My mother was actually a trailblazer in this space. So she came up during the 60s. She was just around during the civil rights movement, and she was a young activist, young person who was very engaged. And she chose behavioral psychology and child psychology initially. She does all the psychology now. And she was somebody who helped stand up offices of multicultural affairs in universities across the country when they didn't exist. Created the first diversity trainings ever for the National Institutes of Health, for instance. So I came up behind her. I remember my father was stationed at West Point Military Academy, and she always took such a scientific approach to it all because she was a behavioral psychologist. So she was administering sort of tests and assessments with the cadets and using that data to help create a more inclusive environment. And I was her little assistant going behind her with all the all the collection. And so I came by, and I always say, I came by way of my vocation the same way that most people on earth do. I just followed my parents.
Such a beautiful inheritance to have.
And it's really, it goes back generations on all sides of my family. All of my parentage and my grandparents, everyone was super engaged and super involved in their communities, in creating more welcoming spaces for people. I mean, I've got my grandfather, paternal grandfather was an attorney, and he helped create some of the early laws that protected senior citizens when they were living in senior communities that used to be sold out from underneath them. Just so much advocacy work on behalf of those who would otherwise not be heard.
It's so wonderful to have grown up in a place where you're empowered and taught your history and where you come from and all the. So my parents immigrated here from India in the 1970s. So I'm first generation US, and I can only speak for myself and the environment that I've grown up in here, but a lot of what I'm seeing, and it's so hard when you come here and culture shock and whatnot, but then just culturally, you lose your history. And then when you lose your history, so much assimilation happens and you don't even realize what you're losing with your heritage. If you're lucky, you wake up, and otherwise, you just see the change and the impact generation after generation.
Yeah, it's so true. One of the things that absolutely broke my heart about my cultural heritage is that my maternal grandmother was like half, at least, Cherokee. She was an indigenous American. And she took all of that information with her because she was alive during a time where that was a liability, where that could get you killed. So she did not want us to know about the extent of our heritage. And she passed as a person of color, and she married a black man and just raised a black family. And that was safer than being indigenous. And it's really sad, as we want to have a greater understanding of who we are, to know that in cases like that, it's not even safe to share the family history and the legacy. It's wild.
I can't even imagine. And it's also one of those I wish too with my grandparents, like I could talk to them and learn more about where it came from.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so, what I'd love to ask you, so the reason how I found you was by reading your book, Subtle Acts of Exclusion. And I found it because I have this beautiful opportunity to create this health and wellness coach training program for a university. One of the health and wellness coach competencies by the National Board for Health and Wellness Coaching is microaggressions. And so, I'd love just for the listeners of this podcast who haven't had the pleasure of reading your book yet, would you mind just summarizing what your book's about?
Yeah. So, subtle acts of exclusion, what we aimed to do was to demystify and rebrand microaggressions. The term itself, microaggressions, is problematic because, one, the prefix micro minimizes the impact of these behaviors and aggression. It puts people immediately on the defensive when they're accused of initiating what we call a subtle act of exclusion. What a subtle act of exclusion is, in our definition, is any behavior, word, action, or deed that further pushes people to the margins. They may not be intentional. This is not like an overt act of bias or an overt act of racism, sexism, etc. These are the small, sometimes subtle things. We call them subtle, not micro. They're not little. They can just be the behaviors, the actions, the words that are often rooted or linked to the unconscious biases that we have, which often overlay on top of the underrepresented or underappreciated demographics. So, common example that a lot of people are familiar with is like, I'm a public speaker, and it is not uncommon for someone to say after they've heard one of my talks that I'm a very articulate speaker. Well, of course I'm an articulate speaker. I'm a seven-figure public speaker. And like, it's what I do professionally, among other things. But when you refer to a person of color as articulate, that is something that has historically been used to make us feel and assume that perhaps as a Black person, we should not be able to speak well, that we are not inherently able to be or expected to be articulate. So, all of the things that we do to just reinforce these negative stereotypes about people, about demographics, about ways of being. So, these subtle acts of exclusion are pernicious. We're all engaging in them. It's not like an indictment of character per se, because it's part of the human condition, just like we all have unconscious biases. We are all initiating SAEs, and that's the short. SAE is subtle acts of exclusion. We're all initiating them without realizing it. But Dr. Michael Barron and I believe that it is worth the effort to learn what are the things that we should be doing to take greater care of the people that we're in community with. Yes, there's a learning curve. Yes, that learning curve is something that is continuous. It's, we like to use that hygiene metaphor. You don't get to take one shower and be done for the rest of your life. You got to wash those bits pretty often, daily, preferably. And the same with subtle acts of exclusion. As more and more demographics become available to us, as people are starting to be more free in their identities and identify different ways of being, we have to learn how to hold them in great care. And it is worth doing that to create psychological safety for people and to create environments that are welcoming and inclusive.
I'm having a visceral, just so much respect and awe for the work that you've done, because when you go into the beginning of the book, you talk about this as well, how even people just dismiss microaggressions, talk about freedom
Mhm.
of speech, and how does that mean I can't say anything? And
Mhm.
My only experience is medicine as an example of culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
When things are the way they are and there's such a big system behind it, whether it's an organization or politics, it's like, how can one person make a change? It's so easy to feel that hopelessness. But the
Mhm.
fact that you guys have been able to write it down, find the evidence behind it, and say, no, change is possible, I cannot even tell you how inspiring that is.
It's so important, especially if we look at the times that we're in now. And when are we not in times, right? We are in times, we are in unprecedented times. And also, if we expect or wait for somebody else on the outside, some institution or entity larger and more powerful than us, to make all the course corrections, we will be waiting forever. We will have headstones before we see that change. And the power of the individual to create a sense of safety around them, like one of the greatest honors of my life is that people by and large, when they encounter me, whether they're in relationship with me for long term or for minutes, they feel a sense of safety. They feel a sense of openness and welcoming and non-judgment. They know that they can come to me as they are, who they are, and that I'm not going to go out of my way, certainly not intentionally, but even by accident, I'm not going to make them feel unsafe. I'm not like going to make them feel othered. And not if I do, but when I do, inevitably step in a pile of SAE and say or do the wrong thing, people feel safe enough to raise their hand and let me know and say, hey, doc, like you're an inclusion expert. You said this thing and it hurt my feelings. And I will own that transgression and I will apologize in an authentic way because it is never my intention to cause harm. I know that I will. And when I do, it is my intention to make amends and do better next time.
That level of personal responsibility, the change begins with ourselves. And just to be able to initiate that, I'd love to know, because you've been able to translate that into the work that you've done in your consulting firm. When you bring this to organizations, I guess, what have you seen as like the impacts maybe that you haven't expected from this?
It has been absolutely incredible to have the privilege to work with organizations that have the open mindedness and the wherewithal to take this on because it is an act of cultural humility for a leader, for a department, for an institution to say, you know what, we maybe have caused some harm. We can acknowledge that. And we want to do better. And to create that invitation to do better requires vulnerability on the part of leadership. And we talk about SAE accountability in the book, which is the mechanism that we like to engage with leaders and organizations to embed these values and behaviors into organizations so that they can stick, so that they become normalized. And that requires leaders to, again, make the invitation and say, you know what, we have messed up in the past. We're trying to do better. When you see us misstepping, when we initiate SAEs, we expect you to call us in, even as the leaders, even as the CEOs and the VPs of the organization, right? The chief medical officers, whoever we are, we expect you to call us in and then we will attempt to do better. And having that kind of reciprocal accountability that starts at the top, it's so beautiful when it can start at the top. And we don't want to externalize it so much and think that it can't be done unless it starts from the top. If you supervise 3 people, you can create that within that tiny group. You, as a leader of just a few people, can make the invitation and say, hey, I read this awesome book. Let's all read it together. I want to do things a little bit differently. Invite people to call you in. And it might feel a little bit vulnerable in the beginning because you're telling people to tell you when you've done something wrong, right? When you've done something that hits them like sandpaper, that creates friction. But what it does is it humanizes you. Anyone in leadership who purports to be impervious to error, you're just off base. Like that is an unsustainable standard, and it does not do anything to expand the relational closeness or increase trust. But when you say, I don't want to make mistakes, but sometimes I might, please let me know when I do, then it also gives people, it makes people feel better when they get that feedback from you or from their supervisor, from a peer, because we're normalizing a culture of saying, I don't want to cause harm, I don't want to cause harm, I don't want to cause harm, tell me how I did, show me how I can do better. So the most beautiful thing that I've seen in the context of organizations is this incredible feedback loop, this nonstop feedback loop where we are always scanning the horizon and the periphery to make sure to see, one, who's not in the room. Like, are we further marginalizing folks just by not having them here and potentially talking about them, but actively looking for the opportunities to create inclusion and name out loud and in a good way when an SAE does happen? It is absolutely incredible. And it's almost like a game of Where's Waldo, or like, where in the world as Carmen Sandiego, a hunt and find. It's like, oh, there's an SAE. And we learn because these things happen for every new demographic that is identified, for every new orientation, for every new disability. There are things that are always emerging in this complex human condition. Each time we learn new things, there are new ways that we might step on each other's toes. And so when somebody is able to name, oh, let me tell you how this could be harmful, even if it's not me, but I have someone who I know who has this particular condition and I know that this would harm them, we learn and we grow in community. If you're one person trying to over index and like take care and expand around SAE, if you're doing that in isolation, it's going to take a lot longer than if you can do that in community and you can learn from each other. And so the biggest single thing that has blown me away is the extent to which the dynamic of back in the day, young people would enter organizations at kind of entry level positions. And there was always kind of a sit down, shut up, earn your place, pay your dues, and then you'll get your chance. And that was another form of marginalization, right? And something that the younger generations have that was conspicuously absent in older generations is this incredible sense of care for community. Younger people these days are so aware of their neurodivergence. They're aware of each other's abilities and disabilities, and they speak in ways that have this care, embrace, this softness, and they're very, very thoughtful about how they hold each other. Particularly the more intersectional, underappreciated identities you have, the greater care these folks are able to take. And so in the context of an empowered organization that is actively creating a sense of belonging, these young people have this amazing experiential power and authority to bring the rest of us along and bring us in because they know how to do it already. And that is experienced as a leadership quality that gets us closer to a culture of care. And that's been really cool to see.
It's amazing. And I love the fact that leadership, it's like, how do you define it? It, like you mentioned, it's not necessarily just by your position, but if you interact, you had mentioned if you work even with 3 people, I like to argue anyone who lives with a family too, you are leading your people of who you're living with. And so just to create this change on every level of interpersonal communication.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to also ask you, so one of the biggest things about this, you had used the word awareness, especially for younger generations, and just the term attributional ambiguity in your book really stood out to me because it's hard to pinpoint like why something is happening. Is it because of this? How do you question yourself? And so I'd love to ask if you could just elaborate more on this.
Yeah, so attributional ambiguity is when something happens, let's say that it's a subtle act of exclusion that occurs, or even an overt act of racism, sexism, whatever it might be that affected you or someone else. Attributional ambiguity happens when you just don't know what to attribute it to. We, as logical creatures, we seek to understand. We want to know why. And so when things happen, and that this is one of the reasons why the term microaggression is so problematic, because the single isolated incident might be able to be qualified as small or insignificant, even though it's not. But when you are a person who holds these marginalized identities, particularly when they are intersectional, and there are many of them, the volume of these infractions happening at rapid speed, they accumulate over time. And that makes the attributional ambiguity even more difficult because you just don't know, did I draw the short straw? Am I having the world's worst luck? Are any of these things actually true about me? Am I unqualified? Am I incapable? Am I less than a man, less than a white person, whatever the case may be? Is this happening because I am queer, black, whatever? And so that just makes things really difficult. And again, this is part of where the psychological safety is really important. You may think that the one little comment you make about somebody's protective hairstyle or the way that they dress in their ethnic garb, you might think that it's really not that big of a deal. But the straw that broke the camel's back is real. That one particular isolated thing might be the thing that they can't attribute to why it is that you chose to say or do this thing that has now caused me harm in an already stressful life, in an already underappreciated body. And now I'm off to go see my therapist and I can't take anymore. I need mental health days. I need time to recover. And so it is really, really, really difficult for people to understand why these things are happening. And the bottom line is we often really can't. And that's why we cannot afford to wait for the system, for leadership to fix these things. We each as individuals have a responsibility to make sure that the environment around us is safe so that people know that if something happens in my orbit, I would hope that they would know definitively that it is not because of something that they are. If anything, when you experience attributional ambiguity, I would invite people to lean into Don Miguel Ruiz's 4 agreements. One of the 4 agreements is not to take anything personally. Whatever it is that people are doing to us, it has far more to do with them, their development, and where they are than it has anything to do with us. It is just hard to occupy a body that is always on the receiving end of these messages that communicate that you are less than, that you are not as capable, and that you are not as worthy. Those messages are not true. And those of us who are thoughtful people, who believe that we are good people, and who want to do right by humanity need to ensure that we are not the ones sending those messages.
And that was the other concept in the book when you talked about internalizing marginalization. I didn't even realize how much of that I consider myself thoughtful or awareness. But then if I look a certain way, I look too young. Maybe people are going to doubt my credibility, or, yeah, I'm not a white male. And like things in medicine, like just certain things like that. I didn't even realize that, like the self talk, that inner dialogue we have, those strong messages are what gets shaped by all these interactions, which is what you're saying. And
Mhm.
I think one of it is just even realizing I don't even fully think I'm even aware of like all the messages I've sent to myself. I don't know who is that have been formed by society. And so I guess you had mentioned mental health as a great resource. The healing from that, once you realize that, then the healing from that, and how do you truly disengage and realize, wait, this is what's happened to me, but it's not real.
Yeah. So the first thing I would just give the story, like, I am only Dr. Jana because of internalized oppression. I am Dr. Jana because I was very young when I started coaching C-suite level people in governments, in universities, in Fortune 500s. And I was chronologically young because I started college when I was 15 years old. And I also come from a genetic line that just doesn't age very fast. I'm almost 50 years old and people are still carding me for for silly things, right? And so I was walking into these environments and these usually older white men were looking at me like, why is this child here to advise me? And so I literally got a doctorate degree just to take the edge off of what it felt like to be perceived as too young. Now, I'm glad I did it. It was valuable, it was useful, but I didn't feel like I needed it. I was already coaching without a coaching certification by virtue of my experience, my talent, my competency. And yet, then still, I felt the need to overcompensate because people were continually giving me the messaging that I might not be qualified or might not be enough based on whatever criteria they were choosing at that time. As far as the messages that we say to ourselves, I don't do the corporate DEI the way that I once did. So that is a legacy that will always live with me. It's actually transforming and coming with me. But I'm much more now in the wellness space. And there's much more to come. I'll come back and talk to you about something that will be right up your alley that is absolutely revolutionary in the medical space. And I'm so excited. However, what I can say is that in my work as a mindfulness and meditation coach, one of the things that I believe, I have a very expansive worldview. As a death doula, it is my responsibility to speak the love language of everyone I work with, regardless of people's spiritual orientation, whether it's organized, non existent, or something in between. I'm able to communicate them in the way that makes them feel seen. And as a result, it's really kind of expanded my worldview in such a way as I'm willing to accept the possibility that we are creating our reality in some way or another, right? Whether it is the agency of free will, choice, whatever, there are ways in which we are creating our reality. And I do believe that we are energetic bodies. I don't think that we have a spirit in a body. I think we're a body and a spirit that is much larger. We have energy that is much larger than we are. And I believe that those messages that we internalize and those negative things that we say to ourselves are actually a set of cheat codes that we wrote for ourselves when we designed the game of our life. We designed a journey whereby we could learn, grow, expand, and be in greater communication with each other and greater love with each other and see each other. So anytime you hear a message in your own mind that hurts your feelings, that feels and sounds terrible, the invitation I have to you is to flip that thing on its head, because it is actually the exact thing you need to hear, but it is upside down and backwards. And I think that that is a code that you wrote for yourself, but you didn't want to make it too easy because you wanted to learn and grow and be challenged. And so flip the code. If you're getting messaging that says, I am not good enough, then the message that you say, the affirmation you can say in the mirror or write it down is, I am worthy. I am enough. I am more than enough. I am exactly perfect the way that I am. Anytime you get a message, whether it's certainly if it's internal, but even if it's external, flip it around, turn it into the aspirational positive, and either write it or say it. But that is the precise antidote to the poison that is internalized oppression and is any negative messaging coming from the outside. Yeah, I invite you to try that out. It has been absolutely game changing for my clients and game changing for me. There is no negative message that can ever enter my mind that is not going to turn into something absolutely resilience building.
That is so powerful. I love that tip. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited how you are transitioned into coaching. And I'm so excited for the coaching world to be able to learn from you and have you as a mentor, because this is the kind of experience that not many people have, and the rich upbringing that you had, because we so need this in the coaching space. And so one of the things I'd love to ask you is, health and wellness coaching has been so rapidly expanding. And obviously, while there's standards, now more standards coming, there's still a long way to go. And so, in terms of coaching education, what do you feel like is missing for coaches to know that they aren't even realizing about subtle acts of exclusion?
Oh, goodness. All coaching should begin with honestly years of personal mental health development, right? I feel fortunate to have been raised in a household with a child psychologist, and my father is a pediatrician and adolescent specialist. So I felt like a lifelong case study anyway. But you have to really know yourself deeply in order to be of the most help. Like, is it possible to be a good coach and not have taken that personal journey? Sure, because you can intellectualize it. And some people are very good at seeing things in other people, but I would highly recommend doing that personal work. I personally am a huge fan of Dr. Richard Schwartz's internal family systems. I think that that is an absolutely game changing paradigm. I was like honored beyond belief when my mother is actually getting a certification with him, and she's in an all Black women's cohort. And he cited Subtle Acts of Exclusion. He cited my work in a course, and I was just like, "Oh wow, that's I feel okay. I can just die now. I'm good." Like it comes full circle. So I would highly recommend that kind of work, that sort of personal development work. Obviously, people can become coaches without certification. It's not all required at this time. I think that understanding your strengths and knowing your lane and choosing either certification or self education, if you're up for it, that is congruous with where it is that you want to occupy. Thinking that you can coach everybody for everything is a problem. So stay in a lane, stay in your lane, or find your lane. You don't have to know exactly what it is from the beginning, but you should become exceedingly competent and skilled and well versed in something in particular. And in my world, it has become manifestation coaching, which is kind of an extension of, it's like a lot of my clients are entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs. They're manifesting expansion and abundance within their lives. That is a space that works really well for me. And I don't know if I heard it in the bio, but I started a nonprofit after I closed the B Corps. So Manifest Equity is the name of the time travel, but I have a nonprofit called Manifest Equity. And our mission is making wellness accessible to equity seeking people and allies. We're looking around and looking at what's going on in the world, and I look at who's being harmed disproportionately. And the folks who I think need the absolute most support have some of the least access or awareness that it exists. And so I'm on a mission to expand that access and expand that awareness so that more people can get access to all manner of healing arts, whether it be coaching, massage therapy, acupuncture, physical, emotional, whatever the support is that they need. And that's including a fellowship that is in development for healers and healing practitioners to be able to subsidize their services as they grow their businesses and then make their services available to people who can't afford them. So wonderful things on the horizon. And that's not even the exciting thing I was going to tell you about. I'll tell you about the exciting thing next time.
I'm already excited. Thank you so much for sharing about the nonprofit. Any links to it, I'll put it in the show notes. So for listeners, you'll be able to follow up with this work and support and reach out, help share.
Awesome.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
so with the coaching also, there's this layer of having that self-awareness. And then even when you think about health and wellness, it's understanding, like you had mentioned, all the social and structural determinants of health and how all of this comes into play that even the person you're coaching might not be aware of, let alone have access or anything. And so for coaches, obviously I recommend to coaches to read your book, your book with with Dr. Barron. But if you were to give coaches a piece of advice as to where to start to incorporate this awareness of subtle acts of inclusion into their practical, like daily work, what would it be?
I would want them to go back to the beginning of my books. I'm usually not this shamelessly self promotional, but I certainly would want them to have a deep foundation in the work. So, like overcoming bias, erasing institutional bias, and even the B Corp handbook, which was my third book and kind of slightly off the path because it's more institutional in nature, but understanding the way that these diversity, equity, and inclusion values affect our businesses as we grow them. And certainly, how do we manage these ideas, these insights, these behaviors and practices in the context of the tools that we use to support our clients? But I think SAE, certainly overcoming bias as well. I say that because the tools that I would offer are enumerated within the context of the books. Like there's like the implicit association test immediately comes to mind. Understand your own biases to some extent and then be able to share things like that with other folks. But honestly, there's just the deep listening component, right? If a coach is aspiring to be expansive and welcoming in this way, they have to be really deep listeners. And that's not always a given with coaches. And the most important thing is to have an expansive and diverse circle yourself. I don't know how you can be there for people, guide people, and understand these things if you do not have the lived experience. And so I shout out and hats off to those folks, maybe people of color or people of the global majority. So I don't want to say people in the majority, but I will say maybe folks who are less marginalized than others. I shout out to the ones who have the cultural humility to understand that they don't know, that they can never know, that they don't understand what people are going through. But the next step behind knowing that you cannot have the lived experience nor fully understand it is to get yourself in proximity to communities that do understand that you cannot be the expert, but that you can learn in community. We have a dearth of people of color in the coaching field. We need more people. I cannot tell you how many women, queer people, people of color, Black people are seeking coaches who look like them, who share demographics, because that shared lived experience is really valuable. And so I would say maybe to the coaches who aren't coaches yet, who are thinking about coaches and happen to occupy these identities, we need you in this work because there's only so far that someone who doesn't understand the lived experience can take you and can guide you. Not that they can't. Like one of my longest and greatest coach slash therapists for over a decade, who's now a friend. I had to fire them so that we could go become friends. Which is awesome. But that person got me a really long way. White, assigned female at birth, queer though, that queer component helped, but they were able to help me in incredible ways, and it wasn't a detriment because they have deep and abiding friendships and relationships with people across demographic spectrum. So I would say if you want to be more competent in this space, then you need to get out in the world and get to know more people. One of my favorite thing about being alive right now is that science is starting to catch up with spirituality, and like magic is just stuff that science hasn't figured out, and a lot of spirituality is starting to fall in that same what quantum physics we can quantify the spooky action at a distance. Don't get me started. But it is absolutely incredible that we are in a time where I keep getting these statistics like I still cannot get over the fact that women were not part of scientific studies until the 90s. What? And it just keeps going and going, and we have no idea. It's the tip of the iceberg. So, yes, we need more people certainly taking scientific approaches. That was the magic of what I was able to do within the institutional context. Lots of people do diversity, but a lot of people, not that there's anything wrong with subjective, it's fine, but we needed to have quantifiable impacts. We needed to do interventions that could be quantified, and it wasn't that hard to accomplish. And so part of why the DEI industry came under such sharp attack was because we didn't have unified standards. We didn't have a centralized way of gaining access to the methodologies that worked consistently. And so people were able to really, really come for the industry. But we need more people who are willing to look at the research, look at the data, and do research and contribute into the body of knowledge for this kind of work, for mental health work, for inclusion work all around. So I welcome you, coaches and scientists. Join us, join us.
I feel so inspired. Like you just want to get up and learn more. And so thank you for sharing your beautiful energy.
Yeah.
We've covered so much today. And so I'd love to ask you what your takeaway message is for listeners. And mostly the audience so far has been coaches and healthcare providers.
Yeah. Well, I would say one of the things that I see so often is that people feel, like you said earlier, like people feel like, oh, well, I can't say anything. It's dangerous to say anything. And people feel like maybe because I don't represent certain demographics, I just cannot, I'll never be able to hit that mark. And that's not true. We need allies, right? Like I represent some demographics. I represent a lot of underrepresented demographics, but still not all of them. And there's always more for me to learn. So if you are a member of an underappreciated group or one or more, I want you to understand how powerful and meaningful that is. And if you have identities that are less marginalized, I want you to understand how powerful and meaningful it is for you to serve as an ally, to be empowered and to choose. Like there are experiences that we as underappreciated people have because we don't get a choice. And those serve us in our coaching practices. And then there are experiences and knowledge and wisdom and tools that people who are less marginalized have access to because they choose to learn and grow and move beyond that scary edge. And that is incredibly powerful. So, because those folks tend to outnumber the underrepresented in coaching fields and otherwise, I need you to understand how important and how powerful it is, and frankly how grateful those of us are. I told you I fired my therapist. We're friends now. I had to hire a new therapist because I'm like, life is lifing really hard over here, and I don't think anyone should ever not be in therapy. I will be in therapy until I am 999 years old. It was a very Doogie Howser moment when I'm looking at these therapists and going, now let's check your bias, Dr. Jana. These people look very young. Are they going to be able to help you? I have a very young and very capable therapist. And it felt so incredibly comforting to read her bio and to see the things that she has spent her time becoming proficient in because she wanted to. So, yes, take that course that adds something to your resume that says, I'm safe in your presence. Join that affiliation that says that my acronym is welcome here in your practice. Do the things, take the extra steps to create an environment of inclusion and belonging. It is worth it. And considering how things are going, we absolutely need you in this fight. Many of us, just as thoughtful humans, talk about changing the world and we want to make the world a better place. As a coach, you actually have your hands on the levers of making that happen. We, as coaches, are superheroes, full stop. My takeaway for you is I am empowering you as a superhero to leverage what you know, leverage who you are, get anything that pulls on your heartstring and feels like, man, I wish I knew more in that space, go know more in that space. Because that is the universe's invitation saying to you, you need to lead in this space and you will help somebody in a way that will absolutely change the world. So carry on, superheroes. I'm honored to be in your company.
Thank you so much. My takeaway too is just hearing your passion, your advocacy for this work for anybody listening to this, regardless of organization, is that the awareness of this is so important because, like you said, it saves lives by
Mhm.
providing that safety. And my heart sometimes breaks when I think about all the things I'm seeing in medical culture and have seen in medical culture. And we internalize so much and it becomes traumatic. There's so much trauma that builds with this. And so I share your book. I've shared it with so many. I will continue to share it. But thank you for everything that you're doing. And for coaches listening to this, I hope you feel empowered. I don't know how you could not feel empowered after listening to Dr. Jana speak, and just continue doing this work because you don't even realize what someone else is carrying until you provide that safe space for them to share it with you. And you have no idea how one conversation can change and save a life. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Such a joy to be here.
Thank you for listening. I appreciate you and value your feedback. So please subscribe and write a constructive review. If you'd like to be informed of new episodes and offerings and resources for coaches, sign up for our email list at www.centerforhealthandwellnesscoaches.com. Sending you warmth and light.